This is a webinar to cover the implementation of a Tosi Box, and I believe a continuation of a series of webinars that Cochrane has hosted that involves IoT and various parts and pieces of it. So what we're going to talk about today is the Tosi Box plug-and-play hardware VPN that will allow you to easily access OT networks with or without building network. So the Tosi Box is produced by a company out of Finland. It's been on the market for a few years. It's proven technology, and it will allow you to either of a building's network and then segregate off everything that's in the OT network, or it will allow you to, via DSL modem or a dedicated cable modem or a cellular access point, allow you to create a complete that's air-gapped from the rest of the building completely. So we've found that hospitals and other places, sometimes data centers or banks, have been pretty appreciative of the air gap in order to allay any security concerns and to minimize any potential breaches. So we're looking at I'm going to do just a couple of quick minutes of an overview of kind of a typical OT network. So in the cloud, I put analytics because that's one of the big driving factors right now for OT networks, is to increase, besides the security aspect of it, is to increase our bandwidth out so that we can manage data. Everybody's all about the data. And so the cloud could be anything, but in this particular case, it's analytics and the gathering of data, crunching the numbers in whatever analytic type program that you're using, and then providing the end user with the results. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to use a Tosi Box, which will allow us to very easily gain secure VPN access without having to be command line certified, and in any of the major ones, Cisco probably being the most predominant. And so this is an extremely simple system to install. It takes about 5 minutes to get the first one set up, and then from there it can be as complex a network as you need without adding any complexity to your skill set for needing to learn how to set it up. So the rest of the OT network that you can see here, first we have the Tosi Box to get in. This is also a product that Cochrane sells, an Optigo fiber interface, which adds speed and a level of security that is more of a physical layer of security at the facility. And if Cochrane hasn't already covered that, and I apologize for not knowing that, then I'm sure that will be something that they cover pretty soon. It's a really neat product. This is the head end, the green box, and a couple of fiber switches that you would use to distribute IP gathering of whatever IP devices you have scattered throughout the building. The next device that you might use in an OT network, especially one that's going to be capable of handling larger amounts of data, is a Dell Edge hardware platform running the Cadero Niagara 4 port. So basically this is a Jace on steroids. It has higher, much faster processor options, and it has more RAM operating type memory, and then you can get, I think, in a solid state drive, the max is 256 gigabytes of SSD in one edge, which will allow you to store a tremendous amount of historical data. So that's just a real brief overview. You can see that we have some JACEs hooked up directly to the Optigo system. We have some IP meters and cameras hooked up to the fiber system, and then we have an IP to MSTP router hooked up to some traditional two-wire devices, and we get to all of those through the Tosi Box. So here's our problem. We have data that's inside and needs to get out, and access from the outside to get in, and we need to have that happen securely. The solution is going to be the Tosi Box, or at least the solution that we propose. So you can see this is a Lock 200. The Lock 200 is a very capable device. It has a very good amount of throughput, especially if you're serving data to a server somewhere else. There are 3 dedicated IP ports on it. The third port is a PoE out, so if you needed to power one PoE device somewhere, you could. The device can also be powered by PoE in, or it comes with a power supply that you can plug into just regular 120 volts. Where you can't see is on the other side, the unexposed side right now, there is a USB port. That USB port is used for a couple of things. Initially, it's used to serialize the master key that will be paired with the lock. Once that's done, then the port can be used to interface with a USB stick-based cellular modem or any other USB device that you might want to put in there. Tosi Box also has a modem that is 4G that we're really not going to talk about today. It is interfaced with and managed through the software on the Lock 200, and it ties into the USB port so that it does not tie up one of your IP ports. The other half of that relationship is the Key 200, the device that has the software that you will install on your computer. If you buy a hardware key, and we'll talk about software keys in a little bit, the hardware key comes with one mobile client. You can purchase additional mobile clients so that you, let's say you have a hospital or a university, an institutional customer with a maintenance staff. They may not necessarily run around with tablets or laptops, or maybe they have people that are on call. You can download from both the Google Play Store and the iTunes Store. You can download a Tosi Box app. You start the app on your phone. You start the software on your computer once your USB stick is plugged in. Tell it to generate a mobile client, and a QR code pops up on your monitor. The app on the phone uses the camera on your phone to grab the QR coding data, and the VPN, whatever level of encryption you have set up already, that is then applied to your phone, and your phone will then be able to log in to any IP devices that are downstream of the Tosi Box, or you can log into the Tosi Box itself to do some remote administration should that need to happen. A series of locks. These are the various options that Tosi Box offers at this time. First one on your screen is a Lock 100. Both of the physical locks that you're going to see here, the 100 and the 200, are DIN rail mountable. Both of them have a really good temperature range of operating capability. The 100 has Wi-Fi built in that can be disabled. And it has a throughput of around 6 meg. So this is going to be a smaller, unless you're using it to serve up only data to either a Tritium server or maybe a FinStack or some other third-party server where you're if you're passing analytics data up to some type of an analytics server, then the 100 is more than sufficient for that because you're not pushing that much data out. The next lock is the one that we've briefly mentioned, the 200. This is by far the most popular lock that we see going out. Again, it's DIN rail mounted. I've already talked to you about the fact that you can power it with PoE and that it also has one PoE out. It is a router, so if you're using this in conjunction with an Optigo fiber system, then it will take care of the routing needs of that system for you, which is really nice. Throughput on it is around 15 meg, and as with all things, the throughput speed depends on the level of encryption that you're using. So you can go to max encryption, you can go to minimum encryption, there's 3 or 4 levels in between, and depending on what level of encryption you take will govern the amount of throughput that you are passing through. One of the really nice things about Tosi Box on the encryption side is that when the data leaves the box heading to either another lock or to a key, it is never unencrypted. The majority of the systems that are out there, especially if they're cloud-based, when the data leaves, the data is encrypted until it gets to the cloud. Then it's moved over to where it's going to be heading out. It's re-encrypted and sent down. So although slightly unlikely, there is a period of time there where that data is sitting out on somebody's computer in an unencrypted state. We really like the fact that the Tosi Box system is encrypted from beginning to end. That type of lock is a virtual central lock, and this is going to be for larger installations, possibly if you're hosting analytics for multiple customers, or you have a customer that has a large campus, or maybe even they're a nationally based customer with many locations across the country, then using a virtual central lock, the basic software is it's just a little bit easier to manage on a desktop than the USB version is, and it allows you to run it on a piece of hardware, some type of server, that I think the limit is around 750 megabit throughput and, I don't know, like 4,000 concurrent connections or something. So it allows you a lot more bandwidth to distribute data back and forth. It also makes it easier if you're using the locks can be peer-to-peer from building to building, but if you have a virtual central lock or a central lock, which we'll talk about in a second, in place, then all your data will come up there, get aggregated, and then be pushed to wherever you need it, and it's much faster and doesn't tie up the bandwidth of the local smaller lock. The virtual central lock runs on a server. You'll need something like VM Fusionware to run it. And the server has to be able to be touched. So they're working on where it can go like to an Amazon web server or something like that. But in general, right now, you need to be able to physically touch the server. And their Tosi Box has some resources available through third-party server hosting, where that can be done by people who are familiar with how to deploy an instance of the virtual central lock. But if you want to spin up your own server in your IT room, then that's just as good too, and is maybe better, because that way you have direct control over it as long as you have, you know, a fairly well-equipped IT room with multiple feeds and things like that. There are a few instances where the software has been implemented on an Amazon web server, but it is much more difficult, and it's usually somebody that already had a great relationship with Amazon, because you still have to touch the server. The last option on the lock currently is an actual blade server, the server software part is the same as the virtual central lock. We have not seen anybody that has a lot of desire to buy the actual hardware, but if you need one, then there is one available. And it comes pre-configured and pretty much ready to go. All right, for the locks, you need some kind of a key. And there are two versions. One is a hardware key, which we touched on briefly. This particular hardware key comes with one mobile client. You can purchase extra mobile clients. The larger the group of mobile clients that you buy at one time, there is a discount on them. But you have to start with one hardware key as a master before you can do anything else. As you get into your deployment, there's going to be some things that are suggested, such as you don't have just one hardware key as a master, but you have one hardware master that's locked away. If the keys become lost or separated and damaged away from the lock, then methods, but it's a lot better to have a spare master key locked away somewhere secure and that you bring out every now and then, and that you have a co-master that you use for your day-to-day operations. The secured master will be brought out whenever, on whatever schedule you think that you need, depending on how many changes that you're making on your network, and it will update itself when you plug it in, and any connections that have been made by the co-master and any other subordinate keys will update automatically back into your secured master, and then you put it back away. This gives you the ability to recover just about anything that happens that's bad. From the end user standpoint, if you have the hardware key, then that's all you need to talk to a system securely from anywhere that you can get an internet connection. So if you're visiting family and relatives for a holiday or some other reason, or you're on vacation and you have to plug into a resort computer, then you can plug in using the hardware key. You'll get a secure VPN tunnel. You will be able to interact with the system, and if the system that you're interacting with has engineering tools on it, you'll be actually able to make engineering changes. And then once you remove the hardware key from whoever's computer that you're temporarily using, there is no way, nothing is stored. There's no way for that computer to access the system again without the key being plugged into it. Hardware key is you can access maybe to a system that they originally didn't need access to, and they have then a secure way of getting into the system. There is also a software key, which is the exact same software as on the hardware key. The only difference is this is loaded on one machine. It's paired with that, and the only way to move it to a different machine is to unpair it and then relicense it on the new machine. It is a little bit less money than the hardware key. It does not include a software key. a mobile key. So to have a mobile key, you have to have the USB stick, and to install soft keys, you have to have at least one USB stick acting as the master. So once you've deployed one, then you can do all soft keys after that, but you have to have at least one as your master. Now we're going to get into the architecture a little bit and show you the flexibility of the system. So the first little drawing we have up here is one key to many locks. And each of those locks, as you can see below it, has a whole bunch of different devices. So this key can access each lock independently with a secure VPN connection and interact only with whatever system that you've designated to be interacted with at that moment. Those systems can't see each other, so there's no cross-pollination, and when you're done with one system, then you can move to the next system and interact with it. So that is the basic one-to-many. A one-to-many with a lock to multiple keys, or multiple keys, a many to one, which is the keys into the lock. We have basically the same scenario here. We have a lock that has a bunch of IP devices behind it, but now we have multiple users that can log into that system concurrently, if needed, to see and interact with the system. Those people one of them may be a master key, and the other two may be subordinates, or they could all be co-masters. It doesn't really matter. The key that is the master key controls what level of access any subordinate keys have. So, for example, they may have access into all of the devices that are downstream, but they may not have access to the lock itself to change any of the configuration setups. You may or may not want, for example, field techs to change the network settings themselves on the lock, because that could potentially harm a bunch of the connections. So you may need that tech to go in and be able to see series of IP controllers that are downstream and do that securely without being able to negatively affect the settings on the lock itself. The is kind of a one-to-one-to-many. So what we have here is locks that are talking to another lock, and then that is able to access the through this system. You can talk to the main lock, you can talk to any of the subordinate locks, and any key holder that has access into the primary lock will be able to also see the secondary locks. Other than that, the functionality as far as what you can do is the exact same. Through this scenario, you can perform administrative tasks on the aggregate lock, and you can perform administrative tasks on the subordinate locks. And likewise, you can do whatever tools you have available to you. You can use those on the IP devices that are downstream. Finally, we have multiple users talking to multiple boxes that also talk to each other. So here we have a master key and a subkey. A subkey could be the end user. The subkey could be the contractor. So depending on who's going to own the controlling relationship of the lock and master key, it may be the end customer, because they may want to have the ability to remove one of their contractors from having access. So let's say that you are Acme Air Conditioning and you have locks that you use for service access to troubleshoot various jobs, or maybe a new construction site where you're accessing the HVAC equipment on the OT before the IT network gets installed. Well, you're going to have a master to your lock, the Acme Air Conditioning lock, but that master can be a subordinate to another master lock and key, so that you have access into their system that they have control over if they decide that the relationship's just not working out. A lot of end customers want to be able to end, or they want to be able to eliminate security problems for whatever reason. They may have some kind of a breach and they don't know what's going on, so they shut everything down and then they go add things back in. Or it's possible that maybe they decide to change service providers. So it's an easy unclick for them to deactivate a subordinate key, and then they can get another subordinate key and give it to their new contractor. At the same time, like I said, the subkey may be the master to the service company's owned locks that are out on new job sites. They may be providing access to a customer site as part of a PM agreement or a controls PM agreement. Maybe you write that in so that they get secure access without having to jump through any hoops, as long as they maintain the contract. When the contract goes away, their access goes away. At that point, maybe they'll decide that the $5 a month they were going to save was not worth the hassle of having to get a new connection set up. Or at that point, you can sell that customer their own lock and key and allow them to go forth. So one of the great things about the Tosi Box is that it does not require a public IP address. So you don't have to pay for one to be set up. You don't have to know what one is. You don't have to pay any recurring charges to allow access into a system. And when you're dealing with a large, sophisticated end customer, usually getting a public IP address is not that big of a deal. When you're dealing with a smaller, less sophisticated customer, most of which don't have dedicated IT departments, then telling them that you need a public IP address is speaking Martian to them. They don't understand what that is. So by providing them a Tosi Box lock that all their equipment is downstream of, and then you provide them a key, or they buy their own key, or they get a soft key, they have access into your system, and you have access into their system so that you can help them maintain it. And again, depending on who owns that relationship, that person, the one that owns the master to that, will be able to sever the ties of whoever's downstream from it. So there are no recurring fees, and the key and lock, both after they've been serialized in the same place and they're deployed, when you activate both of them at the same time, they go up, they say, hey, here I am in the cloud, then they drop out, and they've made a secure tunnel that is unique to those two devices at that time. So the key can find the lock from anywhere as long as both devices have an internet connection. So that's a real strong selling point, especially for medium to light type customers that don't have an IT department. Churches, small retail locations, possibly. We've seen some pretty good success in that scenario with like a small fast food franchisee that may have 10 to 12 locations. In all the locations, and now the owner can monitor freezer temps and air conditioning temps and make sure the lights aren't running all night long in a fairly easy manner without incurring a bunch of recurring monthly charges for public IP addresses. So that was a fairly quick, somewhat over-the-top overview of the Tosi Box system. I just brought this OT graphic back up to kind of remind everybody about what we're doing. We're doing some type of something in the cloud, even if that's just access into the Tosi Box. From the Tosi Box, everything downstream, if it's an IP device, is fully reachable, but is encrypted. modem or an independent DSL or cable modem drop, then you're completely air-gapped. Again, hospitals, anybody that's dealing with HIPAA, if you go look for what is HIPAA, it's whatever that inspector says it is kind of that day. There's not really any HIPAA devices, but there's a whole bunch of people that are scared of HIPAA compliance. So having a dedicated OT protected by a air-gapped VPN protected system makes a lot of people in the hospital business happy. It also makes people in the retail business that are dealing with credit card machines happy because you're not sharing the network that has the credit card machines on it to administrate air conditioners or video cameras or power meters or whatever OT device that you've landed on the secure VPN Tosi Box network. So it takes about 5 minutes to set one up. Tosi Box actually has a little video out that's got a young lady that's, I think, 5 years old that comes out, plugs in the box, lets it sit there for a couple of minutes so that the firmware on the box can download into the box and be ready. Then you take the key, plug it into the USB port for about 30 seconds, and you're done. At that point, you take the key and you load it on your computer so that you can access the key software. You plug in your box wherever it's plugged in, even on your own network right there, so that you can begin setting up the network, either for your location that you're physically at or for a location that the lock is going to be deployed to. Set up all of your IP schemology. You can determine if you're going to use DHCP or not, or if you are, you can limit the range. So if you want to have some DHCP and some static, there are an endless number of options. And if you guys will give me just 1 second, I will show you what the interface looks like. Does for not having my key already installed. Okay. The computer is going to recognize it. I'm going to tell it that I don't want to scan it. As you can see, I hope you can see this, the key is software protected. So this is the key software that you'll get the computer. And right now we are paired, or my key is paired to one lock, which is in our Nashville office. And I can't tell if this is in the way of everybody seeing or not. So these devices right here are IP devices that are installed on our demo board that are downstream from the Tosi Box. So any of these devices, if I double click on them, let's say this one, for those of you that are familiar with EasyIO, there is the CPT login. So if you're running CPT on your machine, you can log into that controller and begin engineering just like you were plugged directly into it. So this is the lock interface itself. So when I was talking about being able to administer and set up the various LANs and WANs and all that kind of stuff, this is the overview screen that I'm circling with my mouse that I hope you can see right now. You can see that we have the DHCP server turned on. We have some reserved static IP ranges, and we have a reserved DHCP range. We are using a lock 200 on this, so we do not have Wi-Fi capability built into this. One way that we use here, this lock and demo board, is that instead of carrying a bunch of demo equipment around now, all of our outside salespeople carry a key. And when they get to wherever it is they're going, we make sure that we have that particular system spun up on the demo board, and then we can show it to the customer without having to carry a bunch of equipment around. So it's nice, especially if you're flying. We found out that this is a very handy tool that makes it much easier for us to show a multitude of systems without having to lug a bunch of trunks and stuff around. So really, that's about it. Let me go back over to the key software for a second. And here real quick. So this is the OptiGo. So Cochrane is a big advocate of OptiGo, and there's a reason for that. It's because it's a really great product. If you haven't seen that yet, then I would suggest you get with them. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I have a little catch in my throat. We were talking about physical security, and I'm just going to show that real quick. So if you have an edge switch plugged in, head in, these ports down here where it says ONSCAP are things that are plugged in directly to the downstream smart switch. There's security in here that once devices are paired, it looks at the MAC address and it says, okay, on port 3 in switch 1, I can see this MAC address. You tell it to lock active and inactive ports, and the only devices that will talk to these particular ports are the ones that have that MAC address. So if you walk up to it and you plug your laptop into an empty port so that you can do your controls things, you're not going to have any access into the system. If you unplug a live port and plug into it there, you're still not going to have access to the system because you don't have that particular MAC address on your device. So this gives you a real nice layer of physical security and a great layer of encrypted access security in both directions. So I think I'm supposed to be done in an hour, and I'm not exactly sure how we facilitate questions, but I have about 15 minutes left if anybody has any questions they would like to dig into.
This is if you have your mute on, he can't hear your questions right now, so just make sure you unmute yourself if you do have questions at this time.
And you can chat, and I assume that will come to me.
Yeah.
That is really great or really bad.
You did a great job. Well, we'll just close off the WebEx then by saying that we appreciate your participation in the WebEx. If you have any additional questions, reach out to your local Cochrane Supply. We hope that you join us for one of our many upcoming Smart Building seminars, and please make sure you're subscribed to our mailing list by visiting cochranesupply.com so you don't miss these future invitations. We thank you guys for participating and have a good day.